Well, hey folks, I went inside the secret polygamist caves of the FLDS a few weeks ago, and you're not going to want to miss what I discovered inside. We're wrapping up Fundamentalist Fridays with this exclusive look into a place that concerned law enforcement for decades. Well, I'm outside of a secret cave that's owned by the FLDS Polygamist group in southern Utah. This cave has been a concern of mine for many decades, especially during the years when I was a sworn police officer charged with investigating cults and polygamy. Our idea was to go and try to find out if children were being abused and then bring the perpetrators to justice. People like Warren Jeffs, who now sits in a prison for the rest of his life. Now, my concern about this particular cave was the ghost stories that suggested that it was filled with weapons. And not only weapons, that it had high-powered explosives inside. We also learned through confidential informants that the cave was filled with survival supplies, all intended to protect the leaders of the FLDS in the event of the end of the world. I think you're going to be really interested as we go inside this place and look around, courtesy of the former bodyguard of 3 of the prophets of the FLDS. He's made it possible for me to get inside on this exclusive tour. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, and thanks so much for joining us throughout this Fundamentalist Fridays series that we've done. It's been a blast working with Sam over at Growing Up in Polygamy and chatting with him and Melissa about his life growing up in the FLDS and my time investigating this cult. You know, one of the most concerning ghost stories to me was 20 years ago when I was still investigating the polygamous community of the FLDS church. And it was this threat of a series of caves in the community where the God Squad reportedly stored weapons, ammunition, and high-powered explosives. When I tried to validate whether those caves really existed, I was met with resistance. In fact, everyone I met said it was nothing more than folklore. In fact, no one would ever even talk to or admit to seeing the exterior of the caves, let alone the interior, and whether or not they really existed. You might remember when I asked Willie Jessup, the former bodyguard of self-proclaimed FLDS prophet Warren Jeffs, his father, who was also self-proclaimed prophet, Rulon Jeffs, and the former leader, Leroy S. Johnson of the FLDS, whether this place existed. 3 years ago, he told me flat out that they didn't exist. Shortly after that, he showed me the outside of them. Then, earlier this year, I was invited by Jessup to spend the night alone in the home that he built for Warren Jeffs, that place where he intended on building and storing his 87 wives. Well, after arriving at the home, and I hope you'll catch that video of me staying in Warren Jeffs' home, Jessup surprised me with a 6 a.m. wake-up call by one of his wives who handed me the keys alongside a map of the secret caves. I was in Short Creek to meet with former FLDS cult member Sam Zitting Wyson of the YouTube channel Growing Up in Polygamy. And we were going to get together and travel around town and record our thoughts as we wandered from site to site in the FLDS community. Hopefully you've caught many of those episodes that we did together. I was advised that I couldn't take anyone with me into the caves, and I cautiously made my way to the opening, all alone, not even with Willie Jessup or any guide to walk me around. Well, I've got to admit that I was quite nervous going into that cave alone, and I made sure that I sent a text out to my family of where I was. I even texted the cave's entrance and made sure that my phone was working and the battery was fully charged, just in case something surprising or unexpected happened. I even went as far as taking the padlock that secured the front gates of the caves with me, so that they would have to put a new padlock on if they were trying to lock me inside. As I opened the gate and I entered inside, I was amazed at the sheer size of this thing. It was carved out of rock and maybe rock and sandstone. It was approximately 12 feet wide and at least 10 feet high, if not higher, throughout most of it. It was deep and cavernous, and you couldn't see inside without a flashlight or something. And thankfully, I had my iPhone with me so that I could use the flashlight on the phone. Before I entered the caves, Willie Jessup had informed me that my concerns were real, and that the FLDS leadership did, in fact, fill the caves with food storage items, clothing, church records, and other items necessary to carry them through if there was ever a government raid on the FLDS group again. Now remember my earlier videos where I talk about Warren Jeffs' father, Rulon Jeffs, predicting that the world was going to come to an end in the year 2000. Well, it didn't happen, and the FLDS members were actually blamed for being unworthy of the end of the world coming. I'm glad that they were unworthy. According to Jeffs, his God told him that they would have a few more years to repent before he came and destroyed the world and cleansed it, and prepared it and turned it over to the FLDS. Personally, I think the real reason the caves were built, thinking that this would have taken decades to do so, and when you're inside, imagine how long it took to do this. The reason these were built was because the FLDS people were not going to be raided again by the government. Remember that 1953 raid. They were not going to risk their lifestyle to be shackled, and they weren't going to risk having their children taken from them again. I suspect that the construction of the caves started immediately following that raid on Short Creek in 1953, and it would have taken many years, if not decades, to complete this work project. I say this because most of the current day members of the FLDS Church don't even know that the caves existed. Those that did, like Sam, only knew the cave was there, but he never had been inside of it and had no idea what was held inside of those caves. In fact, Willie Jessup told me that fewer than 2% of the FLDS church membership, which was then around 15,000 people, even knew that the caves existed. And out of even those 2%, only a handful had ever been inside. This was a well-kept secret, and they were not going to share it. In their terms, it was holy ground, and it was something that nobody else needed to know about. In trying to wrap my mind around why the FLDS would have constructed this cave as a stronghold or a fortress against future attacks, we have to consider a couple of potential motivators for why they might have done this. And so I want to go through those as we kind of explore some of the ideas around this. Now, in asking, people won't say that it was to protect against another government raid, but it only makes sense to me. So the first thing I want to talk about is protection and defense. The cult undoubtedly felt threatened and vulnerable after that 1953 raid. They clearly perceived that the government was aggressors, and they felt like they needed to protect themselves from other pending assaults on their lifestyle and their people. In their minds, I believe that the cave provided a concealed and fortified location where they could store weapons, plan their defensive strategies, and perhaps protect their leaders and other key members if, in fact, a raid ever occurred again. It wouldn't have been possible to get every member of the FLDS church inside the caves. Remember, there were 15,000 of them. But I think it was kind of symbolically their own Noah's Ark. Now, the cave provided secrecy and concealment as well. The FLDS God Squad may have looked at the cave as a safe haven, a place where these cult leaders could operate clandestinely to avoid scrutiny from the authorities or any outsiders in particular. Functionally, it provided a safe place to store explosives, but it also had weapons in there, suggesting to me that it was also going to be a beachhead, so to speak. Now, unless approved by the United States Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, storing explosives could be against the law. Willie Jessup told me that the God Squad had permission from the ATF, that they were actually aware that the polygamists were storing explosives, some of which they claim may have been used in their construction businesses. I'm going to leave this up to you to decide about whether there's truth to that, whether the government was involved, or whether it was completely done behind the curtain. I've not done anything to research this claim that they have, and so I can't validate whether it's true or not. Now, the cave also provided a level of preparation against future conflicts that might come against the FLDS community. Because the cult had this us versus them mindset, they harbored resentment and distrust toward the government and, frankly, any other group or organization that didn't believe in the same ideologies that they had. Stockpiling weapons and explosives could have been seen as preparation for potential future conflicts. It could have also just been in line with their ideology that this end of world would come and they would need to protect their people when they started anew, especially if outsiders were coming into the community trying to get their food or other kinds of things during this apocalyptic time. Think of all the zombie movies you watched, and you gotta have some weapon to protect yourself from zombies. Now, we have to consider that there may have been just symbolic and ideological reasons for this. You think about Scripture, for instance. There are multiple references in Scripture of people seeking refuge inside of caves. These references suggest that religious writings were hidden inside the caves. And frankly, I thought it would be kind of fun to explore this. That here are four events where this is kind of documented, the need to go to a cave. In Genesis chapter 23, Abraham purchased a cave as a burial site for his wife Sarah. Now, this cave was known as the Cave of Machpelah, and I hope I said that right, and it became the burial place for several other patriarchs and matriarchs, including Abraham himself. If we migrate a little bit to the story of David's early years as a fugitive from King Saul, remember it included several instances of him hiding inside caves. In one notable example, in 1 Samuel 24, David and his men hide in the cave of Adullam. This cave becomes a refuge for David and all of his followers as they evade Saul's pursuits. In 1 Kings 19, the prophet Elijah takes shelter in a cave in Mount Sinai after fleeing from Jezebel. It's in this cave that he experiences these powerful encounters with God. Now, it's traditionally believed that Jesus was born in a cave in the town of Bethlehem. Now, Scripture doesn't officially and explicitly mention a cave, but this tradition has been upheld by Christian communities for centuries. And when you go and visit that area, it's pretty amazing because you do go into a cave. And of course, Jesus was buried in a cave tomb after his crucifixion. You know, in some cases, this act of stockpiling weapons and explosives might also have some ideology and explosive kind of symbolism going on. They may themselves, this cult may themselves think that they are warriors of a sense, fighting against perceived injustices or these enemies of their faith. The cave and its contents could have been seen as a symbol of their commitment to their cause. It could have been seen as a sign of their readiness to resist outside interference. And finally, we got to consider the fact that leaders of the cult may seek to maintain control over their followers by controlling the access to these weapons and ammunition. By centralizing these resources in the cave under the supervision of the God Squad, they can exert more authority and influence over the group, reinforcing their position of power within the organization. And that's really what many of these things boil down to, is power, dominion, and control. But regardless of the reason, the cave does exist. The decision to build the cave and store weapons and explosives after that 1953 government raid likely stemmed from a combination of fear, defiance, and a desire for self-preservation. You know, when I walked into the room where the weapons and ammunition and high-powered explosives were stored, I was shocked by the amount of preparation that the FLDS God Squad had made in fortifying this room. The entrance to the armory was secured by a heavy, large steel door, surrounded on the edges by cement. Inside this room was a secondary room with another set of steel doors and cement reinforcements. As I looked at the barrels inside this thing, obviously filled with wine at this point, it reminded me of those Old West powder kegs. And I thought about the explosives that had to have been stored there many, many years ago. Let's watch this video clip. Well, I wanted to just pause for a moment in this room. This was the most critical room and the room of the most concern to us during the years that I was an investigator, because the long-held belief, the ghost stories, were that the FLDS was stockpiling weapons and explosives in this cave. And this confirms that, in fact, the cave is here. It confirms that there's a fortified structure. And I've personally been told by the bodyguard that, yes, in fact, they did store weapons and they did store explosives. So this is going to be really interesting, because another thing that he said that I have not been able to verify is that the explosives were carefully monitored by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau, the explosives, ATF, and that they were completely aware that they were stockpiling those items here, which they say they were using for farming and digging mines and mining and other kinds of things. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But what is true is that they were stockpiling weapons and explosives, along with food storage and all kinds of items to protect the leadership of the FLDS in the event that they ever fell under attack. So really kind of interesting. So this is from inside that room where the explosives were stored, inside the secret caves. You know, today with current heavy equipment, tunnels like this can be dug at a rate of about 2,000 feet per week. But imagine doing this by hand, by drills, and by explosives. And there is evidence that they actually dug this thing by hand when you look at it. So pay close attention when we tour the cave to the chippings and the way they broke the rock out. You'll even see places where they drilled as they prepared to put explosives into the rock to continue digging. I'm going to show you the whole cave at the same time I let Sam Zitting-Wyson see it for the first time ever. And I think you'll enjoy this video. So Sam, I'm going to play the video from inside the caves today so that you can see what you have always wondered about inside there.
See inside the
and I'd love,
cave.
yeah, let's see what your comments are on this as you watch this. And of course, we're going to play this for everyone while you watch it.
Did Willie tell you how these caves were built?
They blasted and chipped their way through it.
That's what I assumed. Wow. See, there's even doors in there into other rooms.
And did you ever imagine that this thing would go on and on as deeply as it does?
See, I had no idea. My best guess was peeking in through those gates as we saw in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew something secretive was going on in there, but I never knew what.
And in this, of course, many of my ghost stories were revealed and validated. But again, this thing is solid rock.
Wow. See, I was always under the impression that it was full of weapons. For some reason, that was the rumor, and that's what I assumed it was.
And that is actually true.
Is that true? Okay.
It had weapons and explosives in it.
Wow. Okay.
So this is kind of an interesting part in this, because there's actually at the top of this video right now is an air hole that's drilled 400 feet up into the top of that mountain.
Wow.
So that there's always an airflow in the building. And I think I capture it here.
It is. Wow. And is that a rope hanging down?
A rope, yeah.
And that goes all the way up?
I think they've dropped it from above down.
Okay. Interesting. You gotta wonder, how big was that hole? Was it a small hole?
No, it was probably 18 inches in diameter.
Could someone fit through it?
I don't think so.
Okay, not that big. Okay. Interesting. Wow. See, there's what I've always wondered, and that even goes even deeper, it looks like.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So this makes me wonder, this is a question I've had recently. There's been documentaries coming out and more information about the LeBaron group from Mexico, and some of them had started a militia. They were killing people and all of this awful stuff. They had lots of weapons and things. So seeing this cave makes me think of that, and I wonder if you ever came across anyone talking about any kind of militia within the FLDS, or is that, because I never experienced that. Okay.
Never heard that, but we always knew that, well, we always had the ghost story that there were weapons and explosives, and of course that fuels all kinds of fear.
Right.
Again, the fear of the unknown.
Exactly, and that's something that maybe there were some families or some people that were trained to use weapons and that they would attack if needed, but that was never something, thankfully, never something I experienced.
Yeah. Now this, you can see us kind of winding our way back to the main opening of the caves, but then again it goes off in a different direction here.
Man, there's just so many offshoots, so many different directions and hallways.
And this is a completely fortified steel door.
Ooh, look at that.
And then within that cavern is another steel door.
So I wonder if they also had this as maybe a bunker that they would have used if needed.
The idea was that the leaders of the FLDS would go here at the apocalypse, or if there was a raid.
Okay.
And then this is kind of eerie, just to think of what might be inside of these barrels in this back room, but this is where the explosives were stored.
Did Willie tell you about if he knew when this was all built? Oh look, looks like barrels of wine or something now. Did he tell you when it was built? Did he know that or not?
You know, I don't know that I ever asked that question.
Because I wonder that, because if it was built for the leaders to go if there was a raid, would they have built it just after the 1953 raid? So that they would have somewhere to go again.
It very well could have been. Yeah,
Interesting.
really, very well could have been.
Wow.
And just as you start thinking maybe you've seen it all, this thing continues on.
It keeps going beyond that. So this is all behind the steel door now, or are you going back?
This is all going back out of that room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a thick door. Solid steel, huh? No, it looks like they have electricity in there as well.
It's all cut off now, but they did at one point, and it looks like now there's a series of lights strung along the ceiling you can see hanging down that they probably hook a generator up to.
Now what's that? It looks like it used to be a key code in there or
Yeah.
something.
And this is what really gets interesting. I'll be interested in your comments here.
Another door. And this is just a normal home door, a wooden door. Interesting. This just keeps going. Whoa. What is this? Is that sheetrock?
It's sheetrock in a bathroom.
Wow.
And there's both a men's and women's bathroom down in there.
Well, hey, at least they got the bathroom covered.
Yeah.
You gotta wonder what kind of plumbing they had going to that. It'd be hard to have a plumbing system through rock.
Yeah, it certainly would.
You didn't find any animals living in there.
No animals.
Look at that, a toilet, sink, everything. And they put sheetrock behind it. I wonder if that's the way that they build out the wall to put plumbing in the wall that way.
Well, what I was wondering too is that if that cavern goes completely through to the other side and they put a wall in between so that they only plumbed once.
I see. That makes sense. That is a very, very large cave. I had no idea. Looking through the gates as a young boy, I had no idea how much there was, how far back it went. That is just crazy. Huh.
And then I think it kind of ends with us walking out the door.
See, most people would have no idea where this even is, right?
Correct, yeah.
I do, because I've snooped around the town, all different angles and parts, and so I've seen almost everything, but this is kind of hidden away. It's almost surprising they didn't try to do a bigger door or gate here, something more solid.
Yeah.
But
remember, it was just shortly after 6 a.m. when I explored this cave, all alone, I might add. But I made some comments at the conclusion that I wanted to share with you before I go into the comments of Sam and I talking about this and our final thoughts. Well, that exploration of the cave was 30 years in the coming, and it didn't disappoint in any way. It validated a couple of things. Number one, that the caves truly exist, that they're deep and cavernous, that they were well thought out and planned, evident by the air duct coming from 400 feet above ground down into this mine. It validated the fact that it was a place where they stored all kinds of survival gear that would have been intended for food and for other means. It was evident after coming in here and having heard firsthand testimony that they existed, that it's a place where they stored weapons. It was a place where they stored high-power explosives. And it was a place that should have been concerning to us, and frankly was. And it's now a place that is benign. It's locked, and you're unable to access it. I've been asked to keep the location secret, although some people figure it out. But I am so grateful to Willie Jessup for allowing me to come in and look and share this with each of you. I want to reiterate that according to Jessup, that the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the federal government that manages explosives in the United States, was fully aware that they were storing high-power explosives. I don't know if that's true or not. I've never been able to validate it. But what I do know is that they say that they were watching it and they were taking care of the report writing and the paperwork on it, and that they were reporting that the explosives were merely here in the event that they needed to blast a mine deeper. And blast mines they did as you look at this thing. It is an incredible feat, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that I had to come and look through it. And I hope you've enjoyed this tour of the secret caves of the FLDS. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this 14-part Fundamentalist Friday series as we've dug into the polygamist cult of the FLDS. Next week, I'm going to be releasing a story map that goes through the entire thing in a place where you can go for reference. But I hope you'll take time to enter your thoughts down below. And please, folks, consider supporting Profiling Evil through a donation. Now, I've put a QR code on the screen and a link that you can donate to in the description box down below. But to sweeten this deal, I'm going to ship you 4 cork Profiling Evil coasters, things you can sit your drink on. 4 Profiling Evil stickers and a Profiling Evil pen. And I'm going to ship it for free anywhere in the United States, all for $20. So I hope you'll provide us some support and order those from us. I hope you'll also consider picking up one of my books, in particular, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. Now, another book that I really like is She Knew No Fear, and you can get either one of them through Profiling Evil. And I'm going to personalize them for you as a bonus. And as a bonus, if you order She Knew No Fear, I'm going to send it to you in hardbound version, and I'm going to sign them for you either way. And remember, folks, you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like audio podcasts, please don't forget to sign up for Profiling Evil podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, thanks so much for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.